November 15th, 2015, Tom Messick was hunting with friends when he suddenly vanished. To this day, no trace of him has ever been found, and many have found this case so mysterious that they turn to otherworldly explanations like alien abduction, Bigfoot, and portals to other dimensions. It seems to have taken on a life of its own in YouTube videos, Facebook groups, Reddit, message boards, websites, and blogs. The most famous, perhaps, is a documentary-style movie, Missing 411: The Hunted, by David Paulides. But in all this flurry of activity and discussion, crucial facts are overlooked and apparently unknown until now. Welcome to Doug Shoe Mysteries. As we go over this case, I believe I can share things with you that you've never heard before. And it's valuable information because the dangers that Tom Messick faced is still out there. And I don't want you to become the next missing person. Thomas E. Messick Sr. was a military veteran, U.S. Army paratrooper, 82nd Airborne Division, serving in the Korean War. He was a survival instructor and hunting safety instructor who had taught basically all the local kids. So he was no stranger to the woods, but was actually a wilderness survival expert who was local to the area. And that's the last person you'd expect to get lost or go missing. So that Sunday it seemed like nothing unusual. There was no need for concern when they went out to hunt deer together, just like they had many, many times over the years. They drove down Lily Pond Road in Horicon, New York. It's called a road, but I'd say it's more like a narrow dirt track that's so bumpy and muddy that you have to drive slowly. They stopped by Lily Pond and parked. Their plan was a deer drive. In other words, the older men would take stationary positions near the pond. The younger men would circle around up the hill and then try to drive the deer down to the stationary hunters. The older men walked a short distance into the woods, maybe 30 or 40 yards, and then they sat down on a rock or a log and waited. All the hunters had radios so they could call for help if anything went wrong. And of course they all had rifles. If he got into trouble, Tom could have fired his rifle into the air as a signal. So if the walkie-talkie didn't work, there was a backup. It would have been very unlikely for two things to fail, but his friends didn't hear from him. 3 p.m. the hunt was over and the group of friends came together just as they had planned. But Tom never came back. So they called him on the radios, no response. They went looking for him, there was no sign of him. They fired their rifles and listened for him to fire a shot. Nothing. So at 4:30 p.m. they called authorities. According to the Time Union, forest rangers arrived that same day and searched throughout the night. The following day the search continued with many agencies responding. It was a massive effort with many searchers on the ground, sometimes hundreds of people. There was up to 300 in one day. They used dogs, they had divers in the water, and helicopters in the air with infrared. The area was completely covered. When he arrived, Under Sheriff Sean Lamery noticed something strange. The woods were quiet and seemingly devoid of wildlife. No deer, not even a chipmunk. They didn't see anything. Why did the woods go silent? The searchers ran strings called bump lines. They would walk not shoulder to shoulder, but close enough to see the other person's ankles. When they reached the next bump line, they'd turn around and do it again. So in this manner, they were building a grid, and you could make sure that every inch of ground was covered. The search continued to Thanksgiving. Authorities told the searchers that Messick was carrying a .30-30 pump-action rifle, 4 rounds of ammunition, a vial of nitroglycerin, a small folding knife, body warmers, a few mini Snickers bar, and a walkie-talkie. But no trace of Messick was ever found, not his rifle, not his radio, no scrap of clothing, not a candy wrapper, nothing. After Thanksgiving, the search was scaled back, but people still kept going out. Authorities asked landowners to check their cabins or sheds, check their own property. In the following months and years, authorities asked hikers and hunters to be aware, be on the lookout for any trace of Tom Messick. It's been over 8 years now, and still not a trace. And a lot of people wonder how that could be, and how far could he have gone? Tom was 82 years old. He was legally blind in the right eye, hearing impaired, and he had extensive health problems, including heart issues. That's why he'd been given a stationary position, waiting in one place while other hunters drove deer toward him. They should have found him right at that spot. But if he had wandered off, or gone chasing a deer or something, then how far would you expect him to go? It should have been easy to find him. It seems impossible that after that amount of searching that he'd still be missing. I think this is why theories about the supernatural are so popular. Many have speculated about Bigfoot, but no one saw Bigfoot. No one saw any flying saucers. People are presenting theories that many would call extraordinary, so where's your evidence for that? And perhaps there is some. People have said that the woods went silent and no wild animals were seen. One person to report that was Under Sheriff Lamery, but there were others. That could be evidence. Some, when referencing strange phenomena, have highlighted the fact that the FBI became involved. Tom Messick's wife, Beverly, reported that 2 FBI agents met with her. She's quoted in the Times-Union, quote, "The FBI told me something isn't right with the case, but they don't know what. They won't share any theories if they have them." So why was the FBI involved with the case? Also, one of the hunters reported a strange noise, saying it was like nothing he'd ever heard before. It was maybe like the sound of a huge metal trap snapping shut. What was that? Many people speculate it was a metal trap door designed to catch someone. Well, some say it was a portal to another dimension. Others believe in a vast underground cave system stretching across North America and maybe even populated by strange, malevolent creatures. But what evidence do we have for any of those things? I don't see alien spacecraft. I don't see Sasquatch. But I do see real hazards right in that area. There are natural dangers and there's artificial dangers. No one seems to be talking about them. Maybe they don't know. I think I might be the person who's meant to bring this hidden knowledge to the world, and I hope it saves lives. These same dangers are still out there in the northeastern woodlands. I don't want you to be the next one to go missing. The rain's picked up. Do you want me to keep telling you the story? In my opinion, it's getting good. Now we're getting into basically hidden knowledge, because I'm not aware of anyone else reporting on this. So one of the reasons I can do that is because I spend a lot of time out in the woods. Always have. But this is my studio. It's raining in the studio. So if you hear an occasional drip, please forgive me. Alright. The first natural hazard that I want to talk about is caves. And some of these caves are so small, I'd call it like a little crevice or something. But crevices are caves, and some of these are things that can crawl in horizontally, while others are pits in the ground. And I get a lot of disagreement here, but I mean, it's factual. I know what I'm talking about. There are pits in that particular area we're talking about, and it's because the landscape was created by glaciers. Glaciers carved it out, so you have little hills. Many of the hills have steep sides, and you have a lot of little lakes and ponds, and that's because glaciers carved out a depression, and some of these depressions are filled in with water now. So we see them in our world today as bodies of water, but it's a pit, huge pit, carved out by glaciers. They're also smaller pits, or at least the mouth of it is smaller. And these glaciers carved out the landscape. They also carried along a lot of boulders as they were going through. Boulders from the size of basketballs to the size of cars to the size of houses, and that is no exaggeration. And a lot of times you'll see a boulder on the surface. A lot of people call those, oh, it's a glacial erratic. Here's just this huge boulder sitting on the ground. But if you look at it carefully, a lot of times you'll see exposed or partially exposed out of the ground smaller boulders, and this huge boulder is perched on top of that. So if you could strip away all that topsoil, in a lot of these areas you'd see a boulder field. I mean, it is a boulder field, it's just covered by a layer of soil, and on top of that is dead leaves and vegetation, and even enough dirt now, trees are growing on top, but underneath it's a boulder field. These boulders tend to be round or round-ish, so they don't fit together perfectly like a jigsaw puzzle. That means there's cracks and crevices and even caves in between. And I'll give you an illustration. Here you have boulders laid down by glaciers. Over the ages, vegetation grows over it. Many of the voids between the glaciers might have been filled in with sand or gravel when the glaciers are moving through. Also, dirt and mud could have washed in over the centuries. It filled in a lot of the voids, but not all. So this is the bright, cheery world as we see it. One of us goes walking in the woods without a care. The danger is that the mouth of a pit can get covered by roots, leaves, other vegetation, maybe dead vegetation. It can conceal the mouth of a pit, but not be strong enough to hold a person's weight. So if you step on one, you can crash through and fall in. It's happened to me. I have video footage. I'll put the link in the description. There's a video on my other channel, Doug Shoe Bushcraft. And I was hiking along, and there was a pit. It was like a booby trap, but just naturally made. No person made it. The mouth of that pit was just big enough for my foot to fall through. And it was covered with leaves and such. And Murphy's Law, I had to accidentally step right on the mouth of the pit. My foot fell through and part of my leg, and the momentum of my body kept going. I nearly broke my leg. And you know, you have a larger pit that can be even more dangerous because the whole person can fall in. So Tom Messick was wearing camouflage clothing. If he did fall into something like that, then dead leaves could have blown around, started to cover the opening. It was November, the weather was getting colder. Ice and snow could have covered and concealed the pit. And in the following days, as the search went on, that ice could have been strong enough to support a person's weight. And if that was the case, then one of those searchers could have stepped on or even stood on the mouth of that pit and never known it was there. Another fact is that many of these pits and caves are unstable. So if someone goes into one and it collapses, then there can be literal tons of rock on top of him, and likely he'll never be found. A person can accidentally fall in, or they might crawl into a crevice or cave. It was November, so at night it typically gets a lot colder. A person might be seeking shelter, or there's something that's known as terminal burrowing. Scientists have observed that in the end stages of hypothermia, a person might crawl into a tight space. And if he does that, and he's in the wilderness, then he might be really hard to find. And there are even more dangers. It goes without saying that there's water in Lily Pond. And look on Google Maps. Around there are a lot of swamps, marshy areas, beaver ponds. Let's say there was a natural pit, and the mouth of that pit is under a couple feet of water. It's a natural booby trap. So here's my theory on what may have happened that fits the evidence we have. One of the hunters heard a strange sound. Tom Messick was carrying a .30-30 rifle, which will fire underwater. I'm not advising that. It's very dangerous. Don't do it. However, my theory is that Tom could have fallen into a water-filled pit. The rifle could have accidentally fired underwater, or he could have fired it as a signal for help, and that would have made a strange sound. So those are some of the natural hazards out there. And here are some man-made dangers. The area was settled long ago, so there are likely old wells out there, long forgotten. People can fall into those, and also there's old mines. In that specific area, there's been a lot of mining over the years, and people die that way. I mean, they fall in, or they go in, and it can collapse on them. So in my expert opinion, one of these known hazards caused Tom Messick to lose his life. I hope that the viewers will listen and watch out for these things. But even so, it can happen to the best of us. So make sure to appreciate the people around you. Find ways to show love to family and friends while you can. Tom Messick made it all the way to age 82, and that's an accomplishment. Not all of us will live that long, and it can seem to go by quickly. Tom's wife Beverly was quoted in the Times-Union a year after he went missing. Quote, "I don't know how to live without him. I know he's in heaven and he didn't make any stops along the way. I miss him so much. He was my everything." She celebrated their 57th anniversary alone. I've been told his dog has been sitting by the window looking out, waiting for him to come home. He won't be coming back to us, but one day we'll go to him. God bless you, Tom. We look forward to that day. And this is the testimony that God gave us eternal life, and this life is in His Son. 1 John 5:11.